Hey, what's up there, guys? It's Sage Armageddon coming to you with another Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelists deck video. Well, not a deck video, but another video in terms of some of the fundamental building blocks when it comes to deck building. In the last video we did, we went over all the major categories for the most part that are often considered by more competitive players: starters, extenders, board wipes, floodgates, and then the other category, which is everything else basically. And we discussed how competitive players, especially, consider the first four categories as their go to. Normally, they most likely all start out with the first two categories, which are starters and extenders, which is why what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go over starters and extenders specifically a little bit more here. Just the basic scenario for any newer players or any players that want to brush up on their fundamentals, because after all, even if you are a a pro or a very advanced player, the fundamentals are what carry everything. So I know me personally, I often look at these fundamental videos as well. They might not seem like they help, but they might. So, but with no further ado, let's go ahead. So starters and extenders are what we're going to be discussing today specifically. Those are the first two categories. And it's often these that duelists think about when they're trying to build a strategy or a win, like when they have an idea for a deck. Normally they start out with these cards. And what are they exactly? Well, starters and extenders are, to put it mildly, are basically just what you use to help build your game state or win condition. So starters, to start out, no pun intended. Um, why am I typing start? But starters are cards that basically let your engine start. Now, maybe in another video I'll go over what an engine is specifically, but for now, all you need to know is that an engine is a group of cards, typically two or more, that help you to get to a specific strategy that you're trying to get to. Like I said, I'm not going to go over it too specifically here, but one day. So it's normally a good practice to, instead of thinking of things in terms of monsters, spells, and traps, just think of them in terms of starters and extenders, board wipes, etc. Me, I often think of the starters and extenders as free cards or quote unquote good cards. That's normally the terminology you might hear me use in some of my past videos, especially. But so Stratos is a good example of a starter. Let's see what else we got. I'm a fairy player, so the agent. So we're gonna go ahead and grab Venus, and then we're gonna grab Earth. Those are some examples. If you want to play Amazons, for example, you think, how should I build the deck? Now, you can always start out building decks the way you might have your own method or approach to doing it. However, this is just for the purposes of information to give you a visualization. Me personally, I start out with the free cards, I call them starters and extenders. So if I was building an Amazon deck, for example, I would, okay, this card says that if it's normal or special summon, you can add an Amazon, a spell, or trap from your deck to your hand. So if we add three of those. So this is the starter of the deck. It gets your plays going, and that's basically what starters are. So if we'll continue with this a bit here, but for now, let's go ahead and move on to. I could probably empty this. I don't need it. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to back to what we had here. So Stratos is a starter, and starters help you to get your deck rolling. Basically, it's like I stated in the last video: a car or a vehicle with no engine isn't going to go anywhere. Same thing with a deck. So starter cards are extremely important, if not the most important aspect of your engine. Um, and so you just kind of use them to get the deck rolling. And a good practice might be is if Let me use something I'm familiar with so I don't have to do any thinking. So let's say if you were going to build a deck, normally you would want to try to figure out what cards will play the role of your starters. They can be monsters, they can be spells. And competitive players will likely tell you that their trap cards are not good starters or not starters at all because you have to set them and then use them. But it depends on what deck you're using. For example, if you're using a counter fairy deck, Rebirth of Parshath is kind of a starter because counter fairies are a very simple type of deck, and I'm not going to go too much in specific with them, but they don't really have engines, and they're basically the win condition of counter fairies, even though it's extremely easy to understand in concept, it's difficult to execute because they don't have real starters or engines to get the deck rolling. But the win condition or the board state that you want with counter fairies is counter traps in a body. So this card allows you to basically negate the activation of a card and then summon a giant monster to the board. Which if you have at least two more counter traps, your opponent's in trouble. You already fulfilled the win condition of the deck. So if you go first and you put this card down, it's kind of a starter. It's a slow one. Um, and that's where we're going to go over the quality of the starters. Competitive players, of course, would state that it would be considered a not a starter at all or a poor quality one, but it kind of depends on what type of deck. Counter fairies are a different story. So this is slow, but it fulfills your win condition immediately if you draw the correct hand. So, but this would be considered a lower value starter, and so would the Agent of Mystery Earth, because normally when you're using this card, you summon it and then you search for an agent monster. Most players are almost always going to just search for Venus, sometimes Jupiter, but not really. And so let's go ahead and let's say that we're building this. This is the crux of my counter fairy deck, and we'll go over how absurd and discuss why. Oh, you're using those as counter fairies. We'll go over that another time. But these are like these. If I was building a counter fairy deck, my latest one, these are the starters for the deck. Um, Six of them are quote unquote poor quality starters, and three of them are high quality starters. Venus is a high quality starter. It is immune to Ash Blossom, not other hand traps, unfortunately, but Ash Blossom does not work on Venus. Um, it does, but all you have to do is just pay 500 more. It doesn't stop it for the turn. So, but Venus is a strong starter. You can get this card by itself can get you into Saryuja. It can get you into what's the name? I'm sorry. Yeah, it can get you in Saryuja. It can get you into Avramax. It can get you into whatever. But we're talking about this card as a starter card. Now, one thing to keep in mind is a starter card is your starter card is trying to help get your deck rolling. So if you summon, let's say for example, you summon the Agent of Creation Venus, she basically lets you summon three of these cards here. So you have four monsters on the board, and you can do whatever you want with them. Let's say that you wanted to go into a Link monster. With Venus, you can go into any generic Link monster you want, pretty much. So let's say that you wanted to go into a Cross Sheep or a Hip Hashinogen. Is this card still a decent starter? Well, I would argue in this situation, no. Because if we think about it, part of what makes a card a starter card is how it functions in your deck strategy. So whenever you summon a card and you're trying to go for something, you have to think, is this building towards my deck's actual strategy and win condition? Is this a glue that's connecting me to the rest of my deck? In this situation, summoning these two cards, no, it's not. You're just gonna have a body on the board, and that's it. This card only works with rituals, fusions, and stuff. And the best effect on this card is to draw two cards and discard two cards. Um, Drawing cards, some people call them starter cards, such as Pot of Desires, for example. But I wouldn't. I would say that they're poor quality starter cards, probably even more so than these six cards here. And people might disagree with that, but the reason why is because draw power is an uncertain variable. The most competitive decks, the consistency engines that they typically get the most success with are I'm sorry, not searching cards that let you search like Earth, search for one agent from your deck and add it to your hand, or sending cards to the graveyard, which is kind of like searching, it's just not adding it to your hand. So cards like Foolish Burial or other monsters, for example. Let's go ahead and get Foolish. Foolish basically just lets you send one card to the graveyard. This is an example of Mill. Mill is also a consistency engine, and that in terms of Foolish Burial, this is a controlled mill. Now, we could talk about this a bit later in the engine video, but this is a controlled mill card, so you can send one card to the graveyard, and if it's something like malicious or is something that you want in the graveyard that you can summon, then you might as well be adding it to your hand. The graveyard is an extra hand, so a lot of players would say. So, um, no, I don't run this, but just an example there. So, it has to be draw power is an uncertain variable. You're not guaranteed to get what you need. You could draw stuff that you don't need, in which case it didn't function as a starter. It can function as a starter if it draws you into something that you need, like a Venus or an Earth or something. Now, what I stated earlier about poor quality starters, what did I mean by that? Well, in the case of this trap card, yeah, it's a trap is slow, but what about Earth? Earth could also be considered a poor quality starter card because when you summon Earth, you use your normal summon to search for Venus, and that's it. That's normally it. And normally, what people have to go ahead and do is they normally have to search for, let's go with Celestial Transformation. They normally put cards like this or Transmodify. Transmodify. They put cards like these cards and put them in the side deck. Basically, this card allows you to special summon a fairy from your hand, but destroy it at the end of the turn. And this card, you send one face-up monster you control, special summon a monster, the same type and attribute, but one level higher. So they will use this to send Earth to the graveyard as a level 2 light fairy. Then they get a level 3 light fairy onto the board. And that's fine and dandy, but there's several problems with this. One, these cards are technically minuses. You're losing card advantage technically, which we're not going to get into it too much, but some decks you can get away with using cards like this. Valkyries, for example, I use Celestial Transformation to destroy dreams all the time. Um, this card is extremely good in that deck, but there are specific reasons why. But another problem with Celestial Transformation and Transmodify is that they're in the other category. They don't do anything themselves to help further your game state or weaken your opponent. They're cards that are extremely conjunctional, what I call them, cards that rely on some specific situation. So if you draw one or two of these cards, because realistically, if you're going to try to use these to make your strategy happen as quickly as possible, you're going to max out. So you're going to run like three transmodifies. Some people might run three transmodifies and three celestial transformations, six total. Problem is that you're going to run into a problem where you might get Earth, but you don't get transmodify or celestial transformation. You might get Celestial Transformation or Transmodify, but you don't get Earth. You might draw multiple Celestial Transformations and or Transmodifies, and you can't do nothing with them to help your deck. Or you might get hand trapped the moment you summon at Earth. When you considering those things in isolation might not be a problem, but when you bring them all together, your percent chance of failure using this specific type of strategy will take a great dip to the consistency of your deck. Especially when you consider you only have 3 Earths and no way to search for it, and no way to search for Transmodify or Celestial Transformation that makes sense with the deck. So that's going to cause a problem for your build. And let me see. So how can we make Earth a better quality starter? Well, the thing about it is that when people do things like using Transmodify, they try to speed up the deck because today's metagame in Yu-Gi-Oh can get pretty damn fast. You see the stuff that people do. They summon giant boards. They use an offense is the best defense approach. They go first and then they summon 4 negates. That's stopping you from playing through sheer offense, basically. Unfortunately, agents are an archaic deck that came out around 2011. Cards like Venus came out as early as 2005 or four, I think. So these cards are old, like 10 plus years old. Venus is like 15 years old, if not older. So trying to make them keep up with the metagame it's not gonna work, unfortunately, because the truth of the matter is that they're too slow. You can't trying to make them move faster is is what causes decks like this and Archfiends to falter. They're not fast decks, unfortunately. So how do you fix it? Well, a good example what you can do is turn Earth. Earth is a slow starter, so it makes it poor quality. It's poor quality starter because it's too slow compared to your opponent. So normally in Yu-Gi-Oh, we can apply the inverse. If a deck is too slow to keep up, slow your opponent down, and that's what counter fairies allow for you to do. They're heavy defense. I don't think I've ever been shot through or run down in a single turn or 2 turns or even 3 turns using this deck. Sometimes you might lose to inevitability when playing counter fairies, but you have a strong defense. Counter traps are the ultimate say no cards. They negate and stop everything except counter traps. Or super poly if your opponent is a super poly rip. But other than that, your opponent better have a counter trap, but you typically have more, so it doesn't matter. Um, so when you summon Earth, it's okay to wait a turn if you just set 4 counter traps, or 5 if you use like Pot of Extravagance or something like that. It's okay. They just set the counter traps and then just sit on Earth. That's a different story than just summoning Earth and trying to find a way to speed the deck up to get more monsters out. Because this deck is because agents are heavily normal summon reliant. Look at some of the older agent decks: Sandkin, Spirit Reaper, Earth, Venus. Slower deck by today's standards. So instead of trying to speed it up, slow your opponent down. Counter traps they kind of can't play around counter traps so long as you actually have the resources and you make the right negation. This is a permission deck, so your opponent is at your mercy. They basically have to hope you f up before they can play Yu-Gi-Oh, or hope that they go first. But we're not gonna go too much more into it. But this card can be a better quality starter because of that. And as I was stating, some of these starters can be poor quality or a good quality. It depends on certain variables. But the key thing that you want a starter to do is to be able to get you towards the win condition for your deck, or to get you is act as a glue to the rest of your deck, a nexus, as you will. So if Venus summons these 2 cards, it's not doing anything. But if Venus, let's say that we go to Karsath here, all of a sudden Venus actually is a very strong starter card because you can go into this guy. He basically lets you discard a card to search for either the Sanctuary in the Sky or a card that lists Sanctuary in the Sky in its card name. So we keep that in context. This is a counter fairy build. So we could search for this card, this card, this card, or if we need counter shots and we have this card already, then we can search for Divine Punishment. And there you go. My build, I only run like one copy of each of these. And what you do is you use Venus to summon this guy. And you search for whatever you're missing, and then you can actually use a remaining Shine Ball to summon this guy, one of these out, if you search for them. So this gets you into your deck in a very smart, intelligent way without having to run three copies of these like you see in typical counter fairy decks, right? And we'll get over more of this more in engines, but this turns Venus into a strong starter. And to just to summarize what I'm discussing here, in order to make a card a stronger starter, you just have to the card has to help your strategy, help you search for cards that you need for your strategy. If you're using counter fairies, you want to get counter traps and you want to get counter fairies that pay you for using counter traps. This card lets you do both of those. If you're using heroes, you just want to kind of be degenerate. No, I'm just kidding. I actually don't know technically what heroes win condition is off the top of my head. If I just built the deck by instinct, it will work, but I don't completely understand them like that. I don't use heroes. So. But just a card is not a starter just because you use it and it summons cards typically. It has to bring you towards a win condition, specifically your deck specific win condition. Those are what good starters typically are. Now, sometimes so long as like if you have a starter card that gets you a Borreload Savage Dragon, that's still a good starter because it's getting you a win condition. If your opponent can't play Yu-Gi-Oh, you win. So it doesn't have to necessarily be synergistic with the deck per se, if that makes any sense. So long as it gets you towards what your deck is trying to do. And every competitive deck, especially, is trying to win. So every deck is trying to do the same thing. So if you think about it like that in a very subatomic level, every competitive build is trying to win the game or win as many games as possible. So even if you're using this deck for example, and let's say you have the Sanctuary in the Sky here, we're going to turn Earth into a stronger starter card. So we're gonna go ahead and get this card here. So this card, if Sanctuary in the Sky is on the board, you can just special summon it. It's a tuner. These are both tuners. So you know where this is going. We're gonna go into Needle Fiber. Summon this guy. And then with Needle Fiber, if you want to be a degenerate, you can go into Mech Phantom Beast Orion here. Um, yeah. I'm not gonna discuss what the card does. Anybody that knows this degenerate combo, you know who you are. But and I'm just playing, by the way. Don't take it to heart. You know? But you can technically do that. Something like that will turn Earth into a more powerful quality starter card because you search for something and then you special summon the Uranus, right? You use both of these to go into this card. This card lets you special summon a level 3 or lower tuner from your deck. So then you summon this guy, and then you go into this card right here. Sorry if I'm not explaining what some of these cards do. Um, you can definitely pause the video at your leisure. I'm not explaining them because they're not the real purpose of the deck to explain what I'm just showing you how to make the difference between poor and high quality starters. So 2+ machine monsters, bam. This card is a machine monster, and Phantom Beast Orion is a machine monster. So you summon this guy and you get 3 tokens and then do what you want from there. This also produces a token. So you can kind of just do what you want. That turns this into a high quality starter card. Um, just because you had Sanctuary in the Sky. So the card does not inherently have good or bad quality starter qualities, shall we say. It's more so what you do with them in your deck to get towards a win condition or your win condition. Any win condition is trying to do the same crap as trying to win Yu-Gi-Oh! So even if you get out Borreload Savage is not a fairy. It stops your opponent from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! So it's a win condition. So you can turn Earth from a poor quality starter into a high quality starter just because you search for this and special summon it. You know, that type of situation. Venus can go from a high quality to a poor quality starter if you take this card out. Now, Venus is, you're not summoning anything that helps your deck or helps you get towards your win condition. So, but, you know, and to just one last example, you could turn Venus into a high quality starter by getting Appaloosa, which Venus can get Appaloosa herself. This basically stops your opponent from using monster effects, which it can be a win condition depending on which deck you're fighting. So she's a high quality starter again. You get what I'm saying with that? Now, that's going to be it for the video for the most part. We did go over starter cards specifically on a more fundamental level. I could definitely make a part 2 to this video for anybody that's requesting. I'll probably do it anyway, so I can explain starters a little bit more deeply and how you can apply them into deck building. Because just throwing a bunch of good cards in your deck doesn't constitute to a good deck. There are other variables, but that's going to be it for this video specifically. If you guys have any comments or concerns or any ideas involving starters in general, and you would like to post those in the comment section, I'll definitely take a look at them. I'm always looking to try to learn more to advance my abilities in this game. And you can like the video if you like it, or subscribe if you want to. But thank you again for visiting Sage's Drawer to hang out and just discuss a bit of Yu-Gi-Oh here. So sorry for the videos being a bit lacking as of late, but hopefully it does something for you and you learn something or you have some new ideas sparked from watching it. So, but until then, I do want to thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, peace, and Sage Armageddon.